So let me ask you something. You sit down at the end of the month, maybe it's a Sunday night, maybe you just got your bank statement, and you do that thing where you try to figure out where all the money went. You make a decent income, not obscene, but solid. You're not blowing money on yachts or anything. You're not buying bottles at clubs. You're relatively responsible. And yet, somehow, every single month, there's less left over than there should be, and the gap between what you earn and what you actually have to show for it just kind of sits there, quietly mocking you. And the worst part? You can't fully explain it. You know roughly what your fixed expenses are. You have some idea of what you spend on food, subscriptions, whatever. But there's always this fog, this invisible leak, this feeling that money is just quietly seeping out somewhere you're not looking. I've been there. Honestly, I think most people have been there, and most people stay there. Not because they're careless or bad with money, but because nobody ever shows them the actual mechanism, the system underneath the surface that's working against them every single month without making a single sound. My name is Emmy, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, specifically about the invisible structures that shape our financial lives without us ever consenting to them. The pricing systems, the behavioral traps, the silent fees, the psychological nudges buried inside everyday financial products. The stuff that's not dramatic enough to go viral, but is quietly costing the average person thousands of dollars a year. And today, I want to walk you through the ones that I think matter the most, because once you see them, you genuinely cannot unsee them. And that shift, that moment of clarity, is often where real financial change actually starts. So let's talk about why you're losing money every month. And I promise, by the end of this, at least part of it is going to make you go, oh, that's what's been happening. The invisible tax. Inflation erosion on idle cash. Let's start with the one that almost nobody talks about because it's boring and slow and doesn't feel like losing money, even though it absolutely is. Right now, there is a very good chance that you have some amount of money sitting in a traditional savings account at a big national bank. Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, take your pick. These accounts historically pay somewhere between 0.01% and 0.05% in annual interest, which, if you do the math on, say, $10,000, means you're earning about $1 to $5 a year in interest. $1 to $5 on $10,000. Meanwhile, inflation, even in a relatively stable year, tends to run somewhere between 2.5% and 4%. Sometimes higher, as we've seen, which means that same $10,000, if it's just sitting there at 0.01% APY, is actually losing somewhere between $250 and $400 in real purchasing power every single year. Not because you spent it, not because you made a bad investment, just because it's sitting still while the world around it gets more expensive. This is what economists call the real rate of return, and it is almost always negative for people keeping money in traditional savings accounts. The number in your account doesn't go down. That's the trick. The number stays the same, or barely inches up, so it doesn't feel like loss. But the thing that number can buy? That shrinks, quietly, every month. Here's a metaphor I keep coming back to. Imagine you have a block of ice. You put it in a room and walk away. You don't break it, you don't throw it away, you don't do anything wrong. But when you come back a year later, it's smaller. Not because anything happened to it, just because of the environment it was sitting in. That's what a traditional savings account does to cash during inflationary periods. The fix here is genuinely not complicated. High-yield savings accounts, available from online banks like Marcus, Ally, SoFi, Discover, and others, have, at various points in recent years, offered APYs between 4 and 5.5%. On that same $10,000, that's $400 to $550 a year in interest. Is that going to make you rich? No, but it's the difference between your money slightly keeping pace with inflation and actively hemorrhaging purchasing power. And if you have $30,000 or $50,000 sitting idle, which a lot of high earners do actually because they're waiting to figure out what to do with it, we're talking real money, thousands of dollars a year, gone for no reason other than inertia. Move your cash. It takes 20 minutes. This one's almost too easy. The subscription stack. Death by 1,000 small charges. Okay, this next one is the one where people get a little defensive. And I get it, because I've been defensive about it too. We live in a subscription economy, and individually, every subscription you have probably feels completely justified. Netflix? Yeah, obviously. Spotify? Absolutely. Some fitness app, a cloud storage service, maybe a news outlet or two, a meal kit service you use occasionally, a VPN, an AI tool, a password manager, a meditation app you downloaded during a stressful week in March and haven't opened since. Completely reasonable, all of them. But here's what happens when you stack them. The average American household, according to Chase Bank a few years back, underestimates their monthly subscription spending by about $130 to $200. That's not a rounding error. That's a significant systematic blind spot. Most people, when asked, will guess they spend maybe $80 to $100 a month on subscriptions. The actual number tends to be closer to $200 to $300. For some households, it's north of $400. Why the gap? A few reasons. First, a lot of subscriptions are annual, which means you get charged once and then genuinely forget about them until the charge hits again. Second, many subscriptions increase their prices quietly. A $10 service becomes $14, and the new charge just blends into the background noise of your statement. Third, and this is the big one, free trials expire. You sign up for something you mean to cancel, life gets busy, and suddenly you've been paying for a service you don't use for 6 months, maybe longer. There's actually a behavioral economics term for this. It's loosely related to the status quo bias. Once something is set up and running, our default is to leave it alone. Canceling requires an active decision, a few clicks, maybe even a phone call, maybe even a little guilt. Well, I might use it again someday. So it stays, month after month, quietly charging. What I'd recommend is this. Once, just once, sit down and do a full subscription audit. Go through 3 months of bank and credit card statements. Write down every recurring charge, every single one. Then go through the list, and for each one, ask yourself, if I had to actively pay for this today, would I? Not is it worth it in theory, but actually take out my card and pay for it right now. The ones where you hesitate, those are the ones to cut. Most people who do this exercise find $50 to $150 they can recover almost immediately. That's $600 to $1,800 a year for one afternoon of work. The credit card interest trap, the most expensive loan you never applied for. This is the one I feel most strongly about, because the mechanism is so predatory and so well disguised that most people don't fully understand what's happening to them even while it's actively happening. If you carry a balance on a credit card, and about 60% of American cardholders do at some point in a given year, you are most likely paying somewhere between 20% and 29% APR in interest. Some cards go higher. Store cards sometimes hit 30% or more. And here's the thing that most people don't fully internalize. That percentage compounds, monthly, on your average daily balance. Let me put that in real numbers. You have a $5,000 balance on a card with a 24% APR. You make the minimum payment. Let's say it's around $100 a month. At that rate, it will take you roughly 94 months to pay off that balance. That's almost 8 years. And in that time, you will pay approximately $4,300 in interest alone on a $5,000 balance. You've essentially paid for the thing you bought twice. And here's the insidious part. Minimum payments are designed to keep you in debt. This isn't a conspiracy theory, it's just product design. The minimum payment is calculated to keep you in the system long enough to be maximally profitable. It feels like you're making progress because the number goes down a little every month, but the interest being added back in is often almost as much as the payment itself. The way out isn't complicated, but it does require understanding it fully. If you have multiple balances, the two most commonly discussed strategies are the avalanche method, paying off the highest interest debt first to minimize total interest paid, and the snowball method, paying off the smallest balance first for psychological momentum. Both work. The avalanche method is mathematically superior. The snowball method has a better completion rate for people who need behavioral reinforcement. Know which type of person you are. But before any of that, if you have strong credit, look into a balance transfer card with a 0% introductory APR. Many offer 12 to 21 months of zero interest on transferred balances. Transfer your high-interest debt, stop adding to it, and pay it down aggressively during the promo period. This is one of those situations where the financial system has a tool that actually works in the consumer's favor, if you know about it and use it correctly. The lifestyle inflation loop, earning more, keeping less. This one is a little more psychological, a little more uncomfortable, and honestly the one I think matters most for high earners. There's a phenomenon called lifestyle inflation, sometimes called lifestyle creep, and it refers to the tendency for our spending to automatically rise to meet our income. You get a raise, so you upgrade your apartment. You start making more, so you go to nicer restaurants, take more vacations, buy a nicer car. None of these decisions feel dramatic or reckless. Each one in isolation feels completely proportionate. I make good money now, I can afford this. And technically, maybe you can. But the problem is that if your spending grows at the same rate as your income, your net worth doesn't improve. Your lifestyle improves, but your financial position stays exactly the same. You're on a faster treadmill, running harder, covering more ground, and arriving in the exact same place. And here's the part that makes this particularly tricky. Lifestyle inflation tends to operate through a series of reference group comparisons. You look at people around you, your colleagues, your social circle, your Instagram feed, and you anchor your sense of normal spending to theirs. So as you move into higher income environments, the definition of what feels like a reasonable expense quietly shifts upward. A $200 dinner used to feel like a splurge. Now it feels like Tuesday. The data on this is pretty striking. Research consistently shows that beyond a certain income threshold, the number varies depending on the study and location, but somewhere in the range of $75,000 to $100,000 per year for emotional well-being, higher for overall life satisfaction. Additional income has diminishing returns on happiness, but additional savings and net worth, those compound. Those have lasting effects. The dinner doesn't compound. The investment does. What high earners often need isn't a budget in the traditional sense. It's what some financial writers call a pay-yourself-first system, where a fixed percentage of every paycheck is automatically routed into savings or investment accounts before you ever see it. Not what's left over at the end of the month. That number is almost zero, regardless of income, because lifestyle expands to fill whatever space is available. You have to take the money out of play before the lifestyle machine can reach it. Even automating 10 to 15% of gross income into investment accounts and then living on the rest at whatever lifestyle that supports creates a dramatically different financial trajectory than earning more and spending proportionally more. The goal isn't depredation. The goal is just to make sure your future self is getting paid first before your current lifestyle does. The insurance review gap, overpaying for outdated coverage. Here's a quieter one that costs people real money with zero drama. Insurance policies you set up years ago and haven't reviewed since. Insurance is one of those categories where once you've signed up and set it to autopay, it essentially disappears from your financial consciousness, which is exactly what insurance companies are counting on, because in that invisibility, a few things happen. Your premiums quietly increase, a few percent here, a few percent there, because insurers do this incrementally, below the threshold where most people get annoyed enough to shop around. Your coverage becomes misaligned with your actual life. Maybe you're paying for coverage you no longer need,
or you have gaps in areas that have become more important, and you've never compared rates in years, during which time the competitive landscape has shifted and there are almost certainly better deals available. This applies across the board: auto insurance, homeowners or renters insurance, life insurance, and even some health insurance supplemental plans. The rule of thumb is to shop your policies every 2 to 3 years at minimum, not because loyalty is bad, sometimes your current insurer is still the best option, but because you genuinely don't know until you compare. On auto insurance specifically, switching insurers is one of the most reliable ways to save money quickly, because loyalty discounts are almost universally smaller than new customer acquisition discounts. You are often, not always, but often paying a premium for sticking around. The new customer down the street with the same coverage is paying less than you. That's not speculation, it's a documented practice in the industry called price optimization, and it's been reported on extensively. Spending 2 hours comparing insurance quotes across 3 to 4 providers can save $200 to $800 a year for many households. That's not a trivial number.
The investment inertia problem, the cost of waiting. And now, the big one. The one that I think quietly costs people more than any of the others, in the long run. Not investing. Or more precisely, delaying investing. Waiting until you have more figured out. Waiting until the market seems safer. Waiting until you pay off debt first. Waiting until you have a bigger emergency fund. Waiting until you understand it better. Waiting, waiting, waiting. I want to be careful here because I'm not saying ignore your debt or skip your emergency fund. Those are legitimate priorities. But I want to show you what the delay actually costs in concrete terms, because most people dramatically underestimate the math. Let's take 2 people. Person A starts investing $500 a month at age 25. Person B waits until 35 to start investing $500 a month. Both earn an average annual return of 7%, roughly what a broad market index fund has historically averaged over long periods. At age 65, Person A has invested for 40 years, total contributions $240,000, portfolio value approximately $1.3 million. Person B has invested for 30 years, total contributions $180,000. Portfolio value, approximately $567,000. Person B contributed only $60,000 less, but they ended up with roughly $730,000 less. That gap, that $730,000 gap, is almost entirely the cost of 10 years of delay. Not 10 years of reckless spending, not 10 years of bad decisions, just 10 years of waiting. This is compound interest. Einstein, or whoever first said this, I'm honestly not sure he actually said it, was right to call it the 8th wonder of the world. It's not magic, it's just math, but it's math that operates on a scale most people don't viscerally feel until it's too late to fully benefit from it. The antidote is simple in principle. Start now with whatever you have. A broad market index fund, something tracking the S&P 500 or a total market index, held consistently over a long period, is historically one of the most reliable wealth-building vehicles available to individual investors. You don't need to pick stocks, you don't need to time the market, you need to be in the market consistently for as long as possible. Time in the market beats timing the market. It sounds like a bumper sticker. It is also empirically, historically, stubbornly true. If you have access to a 401k with employer matching and you are not contributing enough to get the full match, stop everything you're doing after this video and fix that. An employer match is a 50 to 100% instant return on your money. There is no investment in the world that offers that guaranteed a return. If you're leaving that match on the table, you are, without any exaggeration, leaving free money on the table every single paycheck. The negotiation silence, the money nobody asks for. Last one, and this one's a little different because it's not about a system working against you, it's about a habit of not speaking up. Most people never negotiate. Not their salary, not their rent renewal, not their interest rate, not their cable bill, not their medical bill. And the reason is some mix of discomfort, not knowing it's possible, and a quiet fear of rejection or seeming difficult. But the reality is, many of these things are negotiable, and the cost of not negotiating is almost always higher than the cost of trying and failing. Salary is the obvious one. Studies consistently show that people who negotiate their initial salary earn significantly more over their careers than those who don't, partly because of the immediate difference, but mostly because raises, bonuses, and future offers are often percentages of your current salary. The starting point matters more than people realize, and it's usually negotiable. But there are quieter negotiations that also matter. Credit card interest rates, you can call your issuer and ask for a rate reduction. If you have a decent payment history, they'll often say yes. Studies have found that the majority of people who ask for a rate reduction receive one, but a small fraction of people ever ask. Annual fees on credit cards, often waivable with a phone call, especially if you've been a customer for a while. Medical bills, almost always negotiable, especially for large out-of-pocket expenses. Hospitals and providers have financial assistance programs and negotiation processes that most patients never access because they don't know to ask. Rent is tricky, but sometimes negotiable, particularly in markets where vacancy rates are higher, or if you're renewing and have been a reliable tenant. The worst they can say is no. The underlying principle here is that money often flows toward people who are willing to have a mildly uncomfortable 5-minute conversation. That's the bar. 5 minutes of slight awkwardness versus potentially hundreds or thousands of dollars a year. The silence has a price. Most people just never see the bill. Okay, so let's land this plane. We've covered a lot of ground. Idle cash losing value to inflation in accounts that pay you essentially nothing. The subscription stack quietly draining $200 or more a month from people who would guess the number is half that. Credit card interest compounding in the background while minimum payments create the illusion of progress. Lifestyle inflation keeping net worth flat even as income rises. Insurance policies running on autopilot for years while premiums creep up. The staggering cost of investment delay measured in hundreds of thousands of dollars over a lifetime. And the quiet tax of never negotiating. None of these are dramatic. That's actually the point. These aren't catastrophic financial mistakes. They're slow, quiet, ambient losses, the financial equivalent of a slow leak in a tire. The car drives, for a while, until it doesn't. And the reason most people stay in these patterns isn't stupidity or laziness. It's that nobody ever shows them the whole picture at once. You see one subscription, not the stack. You see a minimum payment, not the 8-year timeline. You see a salary, not what compound growth over 40 years could have looked like if you'd started 5 years earlier. The invisible is where the money goes, and visibility, actually looking at these systems clearly and completely, is where the change starts. You don't have to fix everything at once. In fact, please don't try to fix everything at once, because that's a guaranteed path to overwhelm and doing nothing. Pick one thing from today, just one. Maybe it's opening a high-yield savings account. Maybe it's doing the subscription audit on a Sunday afternoon. Maybe it's calling your credit card company about your rate. Maybe it's logging into your 401k and bumping your contribution up by 2%. One thing this week. Because the math doesn't care whether you feel ready. The compounding of interest, of good habits, of small, consistent decisions starts the moment you start. You've been losing money every month because of systems you couldn't see. Now you can see them. That's where it changes.